grab some cookies over there and enjoy the show tonight. My name is Sue Mack, and I am part of Common Ground Communities. We are a group that got together out of concern over the division and fighting and kind of hatred and fear in our community. We're very focused on building the community in White Lake so that we are strong together and we can support each other. We got together last December, I believe. If everybody who's involved in that group could just stand up for a second so you could see who's in it, and tomorrow it was already standing. We get together every 2 weeks. We would love to invite anybody who is interested in helping this prospect come and join us. We meet the second and fourth Friday of every month at 10 in the morning at the Book Nook. So please, I think we have a lot of work to do. How's everybody doing? You guys, are you doing well?
We're here.
Yeah, I'm going to just do a little story here. I want to get to our esteemed speaker, but in 1989, I had the opportunity to go to San Salvador, and I was struck by a lot of things, but one huge thing that I was really struck by was the fact that there were uniformed men with Uzis on every corner. The poverty was amazing. It was terrible. And I remember flying home thinking how fortunate I was to live in the United States of America, where we didn't have guns on the streets and we didn't have that fear. And I just spent 2 weeks with my granddaughters in Oak Park, Illinois, and if any of you have ever been there, it is a lovely community. They understand community. There are children out riding bikes and parents walking people to school, and there's just, everybody knows everybody's name. And I was just really touched by how nice it was. And a week later, my daughter told me once I came home, there are uniformed men with guns all over, standing outside the schools, down at the 7-Eleven. There's helicopters flying over. In fact, my 3-year-old granddaughter's Montessori school teacher is the one who was shot recently. So this is hitting close to home. She is a lovely, loving, caring woman who basically had her car in the wrong place. ICE came into their community, and she's Hispanic, and she was trying to, I don't know if you've seen the videos or whatever of people like yelling them down and getting ICE out of the way. That's what she was doing. She was just engaged in that, and she was shot. She was unarmed. You've probably heard different things, but she truly was unarmed, and just trying to help her community and save people from being kidnapped off the street. So, yeah, I think I'm kind of struggling a little bit with this isn't the America that I wanted to have my granddaughters raised in. Anyway, and hopefully we hear some things that we can do about this. So I want to read you our mission statement because I really hope people are interested in stepping up and joining us. We are a nonpartisan group. This is not about politics, it's about community, and it's about the strength of people coming together. Our mission statement is, we want to foster an inclusive and understanding community in the White Lake area through education, dialogue, and mutual support. We are dedicated to rebuilding trust and safety and empowering individuals to express their experiences and concerns in a respectful, open environment. As we navigate our changing society, we aim to unite people across differences and encourage healing, resilience, and constructive engagement for a stronger, more informed community. And once again, I encourage you to please participate. So tonight, we're really excited to take another step towards bringing our community together by welcoming Professor David Takitaki. Professor Takitaki is the coordinator of the political science program at Ferris State University, where he also serves as the director of the political engagement project. And he sits on the executive board of the Academic Senate. Professor Takitaki's research interests focus on civic education and participatory democracy. He has received multiple achievement and teaching excellence awards from Muskegon Community College and Ferris State University. He recently served as president of the Michigan Political Science Association. So please join me in welcoming David Takitaki.
Thank you so much, Sue. I'm going to make sure this microphone gives me at least a little bit of amplification, though I probably won't need it. This is smaller than most of my classrooms. Hello.
Hi.
Thank you all for being here. A couple of quick points, disclaimers. First off, I am here in my capacity as a private citizen, right? That means I'm not representing any of the institutions that I work for. I am not representing any of the organizations of which I am a part. Also, because as a former library board member, I understand the importance of maintaining the library as a safe space for all kinds of dialogue in the community, I will reiterate that this is not something that is sponsored by the White Lake Library, all right? I am here tonight to talk to you about democracy, and I'm here tonight specifically to challenge some of the ways that you maybe have thought about democracy, some of the limitations you have seen placed upon our democracy, and hopefully offer you some possibilities. But I have to also acknowledge that we are living in difficult times. And these difficult times are not unique to people of any particular political persuasion. We have arrived at the moment we are at because people have become tense. People have become angry. We are enduring ongoing trauma, and that comes from a variety of different things that we do need to recognize. Many of us are disappointed with not only the processes of government, but frequently those who we do see as our political opposition. It is very common for folks on either side of the aisle in this political moment to not be able to see or understand the motivations, the values, the agenda of the people who are across the aisle, but are also very frequently just across the street. We have reacted with shock at events as they have transpired. Sometimes that is because they seem unseeming to us, unprecedented. And sometimes it is because they are in fact not unprecedented. We become aware of them far after they have been ingrained within our system. And we are shocked that they have been here kind of the whole time. We are confused, we frequently react with disbelief, and I can speak for myself, and I believe most folks, that there's a lot of anger going on. I wish I could be here in kind of the great tradition of Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King and present to you a presentation or a perspective that is untainted by rage. I am not that saintly figure. I get mad a lot. I hug cats. I watch videos online. I play video games. Right? We all have our coping mechanisms, but we cannot remove from ourselves the humanity, because that humanity will actually be core to us coming out of this without there being a butcher's bill and real consequences for all of us and for the world. I also want to point out that it is completely reasonable at this point in time to be somewhere on this perspective or on the scale of depression and despair. And I'm differentiating them because I'm very respectful for depression as a neurological state, right? I am very fortunate in that I myself, I would not say suffer from that neurological state. I have, however, known despair, right? When one event after another strikes you in your moral core. When we move from tragedy to controversy to scandal to difficulty over and over and over again. My wife refers to me quite accurately as an empathy elemental. And if you're an old school gamer, you'll understand that terminology. But what it means is that my sense of empathy tends to be pretty heavily keyed, thus all the cats, right? But for those of us who do have that kind of an empathic nature, who do see empathy as a bit of a superpower in the best of cases, all of this hits multiplicatively, right? And what that can do to all of us is it can beat us down, right? It can put us in a position where the logical thought is surrender, right? Bail out, checking out your expat status for Costa Rica, right? Because you're like, I don't know what this is. And that's, for those of us in our younger years, right? But for those people who are in their older years, right?
We did this once.
Right, well, some of you may have. I'm not going to pretend that's not the case, right? But if you've got 40-year friends, kids, grandkids, churches, and community groups that have been a part of your life forever, the idea of upping and going out of fear or out of desperation or even with the opportunity to do so is not the same as it is for a single young professional, right? And so we need to really take the human element of this series. And we also have to acknowledge that despite the fact that we want to do good and we want to fix things, things are in fact broken. Politics is broken. And it's broken on 3 different levels that I want to make sure I'm very clear about as we proceed. The first place it is broken is what I'm calling the structural and policy level. Right? These, in many ways, are the things that many of us desire most to change. Things like gerrymandering, creating disrepresentation for people around the country, and moving our political dialogue and discourse to the extremes and away from where most of us, regardless of our base political disposition, may sit. Things like campaign finance laws and rules, which actually shift power and influence and voice away from common people and to the most moneyed, most powerful, most commercial interests. Things like voting rights and voting access, which in a pure, small d American-style democracy should be something we want to hear from everyone. And it don't matter if it's someone who is strongly on the right or strongly on the left, because if we do hear from everyone, then the voice that speaks, the place where we land, is representative of everyone, authentically. We also see things like the rule of law. Right? We have built in this country a long tradition of things like precedent. Right? And whether we agree or disagree with the way in which that precedent has been represented, the principle of precedent has anchored a system in which the disposition of law is the same for you whether you were young or old or here or there or then or now. And as things like precedent and the rule of law are undermined by contemporary political tides, no matter which way those tides are pointed, we lose that continuity. And the system is at risk, not only of failing and collapsing, but of hurting people that was never intended to hurt. Increasingly, we can see things like Article 2 of the US Constitution, which is the vesting clause that places executive power in the hands of the president, is an incredibly narrow clause. But its interpretation and how we think about it and how other people think about it and how courts are thinking about it can dramatically change the color and the character of American government without it ever being something that's discussed by the people. And that's a problem. It's a problem, again, for democracy, for continuity, for stability, for security, and for safety. All of these things also have exposed for us at this structural and policy level the importance of informal rules. Much of our system has been based on the idea that political actors would not do things, right? Would not take certain types of policy choices or behavioral choices, would not try to exercise power in certain ways, would not ignore their constitutional responsibilities, would not leave aside the roles they are supposed to play. And what we've learned is that those rules are made of air. They can be broken. And that if we also examine the remainder of the ways in which the system is broken, there are no checks and balances on what have been long-held historical practices. So the structure and policy level is one way in which things are broken. Another way is the political and representative level. This is the level at which that policy is made, right? And we have seen increasing elements of hyperpartisanship at this level. Now, some of that is because of the previous systemic relationships, right? Like the gerrymandering. And some of it is due to things like the laws concerning finance. And some of it is also due to just general polarization. A lot of it is due to things like earned media. We live in an attention economy, right? How do we get the attention of other people? By coming to them with a calm conversation, nuanced debate and policy points, and relatively esoteric important points of law and strategy? Or do we go, oh, the world's on fire! Right? We go, the world's on fire. People respond to controversy. Sometimes they respond because it's a time to stand up and fight, and they get inspired by it. And sometimes it's because the controversy is a threat. And in a world that is increasingly bombarding us with everything from commercial offers to media options to opportunities for volunteership to, conspicuous consumption. If something's going to get your attention and stand out in that crowd, it's got to be pretty shiny. We like shiny things. They're not often good for us. Cookies notwithstanding. Those are good for you. Good for your soul. Okay? But sometimes we buy into the things that aren't necessarily good for us. Also, some of us have embraced, to one extent or another, from one side of the line or another, the norm-breaking behavior. Right? Sometimes that comes as a breath of fresh air if it's coming from your side. Right? Finally, someone's telling it like it is. Right? Finally, someone's, standing up, and I've been waiting for someone to say these things for years. Finally, we're fighting back. Well, against who? Against what? And how? If we're going to understand that there are norms that have constrained political behavior in the past and that have created a certain set of outcomes for us in the present, we got to think about what that's going to be in the future if it's without those norms. This last one I want to talk about very specifically, because this is an outcome point of the previous slide and of the next slide. We have created for ourselves a system in which political actors, political representatives, have two very, very, very different jobs. The first one is getting elected, right? And that requires a skill set that is all about, unfortunately, more often than not, getting attention, raising money, right? Motivating an increasingly small, sometimes gerrymandered base to support you, winning that primary vote, staying relevant. That's not necessarily who we need actually creating policy and offering leadership. We're going to talk about that more in just a moment. So these things are broken. And here's us, right? Here's the base level. Here's the citizen participant level, right? You are here seeking information on this subject. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the fact that this room is almost full, right? And all of my ego aside, this should probably be something that fills the parking lot and stretches out back towards my drive, right? Everyone should be concerned about this. We live in an age of escalating political animosity and tragically political violence, right? Everyone should be concerned, but you are the ones who took the time to be. You're the ones who are taking the time to come listen to someone who most of you don't know, talk about one of those sensitive subjects available for conversation in the world today. Right? Kudos to each and every one of you on that point. But there's a lot more folks out there who aren't. Right? And sometimes that's just not knowing. In education, we don't see ignorance as a derogatory term. Right? It just means you don't know. It's information you do not have. So yeah, I guarantee that there are, 1,000 folks within a mile of this place whom, given the proper information, would be here. But they're not. Sometimes that information is not just absent, sometimes it's wrong. Right? Sometimes it's misinformation. And misinformation can be willful, it can be accidental, but it's insidious no matter which way it gets to. Because there are few better ways to make a good person do bad things, or to make a good person do no things, right? Than to convince them reality is something other than what it actually is. So misinformation is a huge issue. I'm not going to dwell too much on apathy, because this room doesn't have it. You're here. But we all feel it from time to time, don't we? Right? Enough. Back to my cat videos, right? Yeah. But it's there. Also, along with that apathy, there is what I have referred to as a consumer mentality for American politics. Lots of folks, both sides of the aisle, sit. And they expect political parties to act like Samsung or Apple, right? You create a product. You put it out for me to buy or not buy, and I respond by buying it or not buying it. If I don't like it, I don't buy it, right? And that's supposed to clue you in that the product is wrong and you need to change it. And when you produce something that I like, I'll come buy it again. A lot of us look at the parties that way. We look at politics that way. What? I don't like what's on offer? Forget it. And that's a fundamental flaw in this level of our American political system. Because we are not the consumers of democracy. We are its producers. No one up there is separate from us. They are us. We are them. And if we want a different product on offer, it falls on us to create it. And that slides a lot of us right back up into apathy, doesn't it? Because that sounds hard. And I got a lot of other stuff I'm trying to do, right? And who am I? Just one guy. So we have to acknowledge that. Lastly, we have to think about legacy and social partisanship. Here's the challenge I am going to make to each and every one of you. And I don't know your political dispositions, and I don't care at this particular moment in the presentation, right? Imagine for a moment that someone from the opposite side of the aisle that you have regularly professed your preference for comes forward with ideas and an agenda and a perspective, a set of values that you actually absolutely agree with, or that you are at least more than happy to listen to. It's closer to you than anything you've seen before from that other side. Even if you, somewhere in your brain, were to think, you know what? I like what's going on over there. What would be the cost to you to say that publicly? What would your friends think? Your coworkers, people at your church, family members think if suddenly you appeared to be on the other side of that line, or at least friendly towards it? Can you imagine there might be a cause? Right? People who are your close confidants now might pull up at you and not necessarily be willing to listen all that thoroughly to what you had to say about these points and ideas. Think you might be excluded from the book club or the poker night? Right? You might be. We have to acknowledge that that is part of what this has become. Right? Partisanship has become tribalism across much of the American polity. And that ossifies us into competing camps that frequently can't get things done. So let's think about what getting things done might look like. Remember this distinction I talked about a minute ago? Right? On the left, we have that campaigner celebrity, right, model. It is, to a great extent, what the system currently produces, right? Because you gotta win elections, right? And you gotta win primary elections to get to the general, and you need resources to do it. Yes, I take pictures of this. This is all for you, right? We need resources, and we need attention, and you need the support of the party. And frequently, for the best of reasons, and sometimes for pretty cynical ones, the support of the party is dependent upon winning because the party defines success as winning. Winning office, holding majorities, right? That's frequently how parties define success. Like I said, frequently for good reasons. Frequently for good reasons. But let's take a look at what we might hope ends up serving in our governmental offices. Not someone who seeks to win votes, but someone who seeks to improve the lives of the public. Right? Not somebody who's necessarily seeking to hold power, but someone who seeks to preserve things that work, to defend things that are under threat, and to innovate solutions to problems and improve things that don't work. It's a very different mindset than someone who's trying to campaign to a narrow primary electorate. You need a broad understanding of issues to be successful at this second job, right? As we've seen, sometimes you may not be all that conscious at all to be successful at the first one. You need to be able to work collaboratively, communicate effectively to do this second job, to lead and to legislate. Those things can actually be detrimental to the first one. If you are seen as a rhino, right, because you're willing to work across the aisle, or you are seen as, not actually being aligned with the movement because you're willing to sit down with the other side. So this is the third way in which it's broken. Most of you probably knew a lot of this already, right? I am not necessarily giving you anything new, but it's important to set the stage for the next set of very, very challenging ideas. Because this is the first one. Yes, all of this is broken. It's broken for us as citizens. It's broken for us as individuals. But the system is working perfect. Because the system is a living thing. Design is an ongoing process. And the outcomes we are seeing are the product of the current design. We have created systems of districting that allow for gerrymandering. That is a feature of the system. You've created situations in which parties can manipulate for themselves and gain minority power over a majority of otherwise disagreeing citizens. We have created systems in which we ourselves have de-emphasized things like civic education. The system is working properly. The next question we have to ask, though, is who is it working for? And the first one, I think, is pretty obvious. Doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on, right? It's working very, very well for moneyed interests. And those can be corporations or tech bro billionaires, but they can also be collaborations and unions, right? Moneyed interests have a greater degree of influence over the system. Who does it work for? It works well for political extremists, right? Either side. Why? Because if we get dissuaded from participation, we sit home on our hands, that amplifies the power of the people who do show up, who are almost always the most invested, the most radical, right? They're always going to show up. But the more those of us in the middle feel hopeless or disconnected, the better it is for them. It empowers existing political power structures, right? Parties that exist, the systems that exist, the lobbyists that exist, they all gain from the system the way it's built. benefits media actors, right? They can sell you clicks, headlines, easier than they ever could before, right? In many ways, they cultivate their own audiences nowadays, right? It's not like there's networks that are necessarily cutting it right up the middle perfectly, and they never really did. But once we saw cable TV and the internet advance, you can find your audience. You can make it if you want to. So it benefits media actors. And lastly, this is a very specific one, and I want to point this out. It benefits malicious actors. And I'm drawing a distinction from this, from the rest of the list, very deliberately. Because there are folks out there, right, who are just advocates for their industry, who might come off as malicious to some of us under some circumstances, but in their heart of hearts are not trying to do anything other than get ahead, right? Not all advocacy, not even all lobbying is bad. But there are folks who are truly malicious actors. Sometimes they're foreign competitors. Sometimes they're folks who see the kind of conflict and the potential for a systemic breakdown as good, right? They desire that. They're accelerationists. There are people who are campaigning for some kind of racial holy war, right? Those are the kind of malicious actors that I'm talking about. And all of the things that create a disproportionate empowerment from the top of the list empower them as well. So let's talk about positive change, right? First, we'll talk about why it's been hard. If we want to change the structure and policy level, right, we need action from the political and representative level. If we're going to change the political and representative level, we need action and change on our citizen participant level. And if we are going to change this level, the level where we are, we need education, mobilization, organization, and action. And many of us, myself through my own work in civic education, many of you through your work in the community and through various different organizations have been working on that level, right? But there are also forces working against us. Education gets de-emphasized, gets defunded. We shift away from critical thinking exercises, elements of the humanities, support is cut. What ends up happening? Education becomes based on testing at the K-12 level, right? Teachers lose their ability to create innovative criterion and innovative curriculum that actually reach students. And at the higher level, education is immediately tied to financial benefit. Don't teach me what I need to think, teach me what I need to know to get a degree and make a living. End of story. Workforce development becomes the emphasis. Mobilization. What are the narratives we hear around mobilization? You probably heard some of them. You might have some of them in your brain right now. Wondering when I'm going to get to the good part, right? Nothing's going to change. Nothing ever changes. All these actors are the same. And sometimes, you know, the one we need, but also sometimes the one that's most insidious, this too shall pass. Right? All we need to do is wait. It's going to sort itself out. Immediately de-emphasize mobilization. You need to be organized to do it. How do we get divided? Right? Every problem has a what about. This is a problem. What about that? Why weren't you mad about that one? Right? We are concerned. They are the bad guys. Othering. Right? Splitting us up yet again. Social conformity. Right? Nah, you know what? I don't feel like causing a ruckus. All those same reasons I talked about previously. And also, let's not talk about, or let's not forget about recreational hate. Right? It's a troll culture out there, right? Some people like, they call it dunking on people, right? Sometimes we all fall victim to a little bit of shade and fruit, right? When our side wins, the other side loses. That feeds a lot of potential negative things that can prevent collaboration, cooperation, and functional change. And I need to own it too, like everybody else does, right? Sometimes we get pissed and it feels good to see the other side take one on the chin, right? But think about it. Them over there celebrating whenever you feel a loss or hurt, right? What part of our humanity do we lose when that becomes something we seek out? And lastly, of course, how do we discourage action? Well, it's not that hard. right? Political toxicity. I frequently refer to the political arena as my students walking into a room, opening the door, and it's just a whole bunch of poop-fluing monkeys, right? Just flying back and forth, right? And all they see is slander attacks in the media and angry people back and forth. This is before there was the kind of current on severe political violence. And one of the things I have to do is, despite the fact that I'm a political scientist and I do this for a living, I got to put myself in their shoes and be like, why would I go in there, right? Why would I go? I want to, but in some ways, that's precisely what they want to have happen, some of those malicious actors, right? Because if those folks go back and sit down, and ignore things, and just try to, walk their dog and buy a house, it empowers those on the fringes. Another thing that I always say is that your vote gets used every election, right? Doesn't matter if the vote is 1,000,000 to 1,000,001, or 10 to 1, or 2 to 1. That outcome is a legitimate result. So your power is going to be used. The only question is, do you use it or do you leave it for whoever shows up? A lot of times, we leave it. And we know who's showing up. Sometimes it's about disparaging the entire system, right? They're all crooks. Every single one of them. Right? Every single one of them. They're all corrupt. They're all bad. Great, you're going to make me choose from, a glass milkshake or a turd sandwich. No thank you, right? That's not accurate. There are good actors who get involved. Some of them don't stay good forever, right? Or we disagree with them more over time. Or they have to make compromises we wouldn't make. We can't let that sit there. Sometimes it's about moving the goalposts too, right? Well, you're good on this issue and that issue, but what about this one over here? You don't agree with me on that? Well, now you're trash. Right? Purity tests. Someone can do good 95% of the time, but if they miss your 5%, if you're a one-issue person, they're out, so are you. These are massive issues that have prevented us from changing the elements we need to change at the citizen participant level. And so when I talk about what it takes to change things, this is what we're up against. The good news is, we have options. But notice what we have been doing this whole time, right? We have been trying to churn down here at the citizen participant level. We've been trying to throw folks up into the political system, hoping that they will be our champions, they will act as change agents, and that they will eventually get all the way up so that they can change the structure policy level. And it keeps failing, right? We can't get majorities, those people have to make compromises, they get taken out by different election sweeps. It doesn't work. We keep trying it over and over and over and over again. It doesn't work. And so what we end up seeing is increasingly polarized, massive swings, and the dissolution of the very systems that we've been putting people into, because they aren't producing results. They aren't producing results for you, regardless of your political disposition. If you're on the left right now and you are furious about what's going on with the Trump administration, you're looking at the system going, it's broken. It's not giving me what I want. And if you were someone who was brought into the kind of revolutionary change that MAGA promised the people who were deeply needing it, you bought into that because you weren't getting what you wanted previously. So how do we fix it? Where is the change? Can we do it individually? Not really. Is there an option to do it politically? Not under the current systems. Can we make a third party? No. Right? The math on the third party is always bad. You end up splitting the people who are voting with you, and it results in you actually losing ground for all the issues you care about. Right? About revolution. And there's a lot of folks who, don't get me wrong, have a fantasy about what revolution looks like. And sometimes it's like, oh, the system collapses and we all kind of get together and we sing Kumbaya and everybody agrees with me finally and the new age is glorious. Right? A lot of folks, that is their idea of what the other side of revolution looks like. Our side, whatever side that is, wins. And there are a lot of folks for whom that victory is bloodless, and some for whom it is not. And so, the last bit of this revolution is, one, it's never the fantasy people think it is, and two, unless it is very, very much not bloodless, the people who are in opposition to whatever your political perspective is today are going to be here tomorrow. They are not going away. They will be here. They're not getting shipped off to another planet. They're not being wiped out. They're not going up in the rapture, right? They're going to be here. Which means that whatever we do has to include everything. So what do we do? Pause for a reality check. We're getting to the good stuff, but I don't want to pretend like I up here in the vest and the tie with my professor title, right, am unaware of the fact that this is a proposal that is going to be really, really hard to do. It would require a massive amount of work, right? Kind of work that has not yet been seen in the American polity. It would require, it would initially be mocked, right? I expect that will happen here this evening at some point in time, whether you say it out loud or not, right? It will be ignored, may even be condemned. And that if it should gain traction, if it should actually begin to move forward, if it should become manifest, it would be assaulted from all angles. And I say that in an age in which we do see escalating political violence, right? Because it would represent an existential threat to the existing systems of power. That said, it would be moral, it would be legal, and it's possible. I think it's necessary. So here's the proposal. Proposal is this. It's the alliance. And it is a complete reimagining of the American two-party system. It would require and facilitate the creation of two new allied and mirrored political parties that is designed to shift control back to the people and perpetuate responsible, productive democracy. It would also involve the creation of a new non-political organization designed to education, community building, civic capacity, and the public good. It's a three-part alliance. Let me tell you why it is frequently the type of thing that does not get thought of. Because you folks, and most of the sane people out there, don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about party dynamics or the structure of American political institutions. That, however, is my job. Where is the power to shift institutional norms, to change major actors at the political representative level? Where does it exist? It exists at our level, but we haven't been able to manifest it thus far because we've been playing with the same parties that have always existed. But parties are actually really, really powerful. We have become used to the way that these two parties operate, but that is not the way parties have to operate within the American political system. Parties have a tremendous degree of actual power to govern their internal processes. Our parties have devolved much of that into something that looks a lot like our formal election model, because it's been convenient for appealing to the majorities, it's been convenient for their operations over the course of their history. There's also a reasonable thing that it is more small d democratic to build it into the systems that have been existing. But at one point in time, the same parties that today seem to be intractable parts of our society constructed their rules and nominated their candidates in literally those, what they called smoke-filled back rooms, right? In which power brokers and members of certain elite circles decided who got to be that party's nominee, right? Now, I'm not advocating a return to that, but we have the ability to create things like nomination rules and procedures for partisan candidates in these parties. We can establish our own nomination processes. Generally, most states have it so that these party processes have to take place at some sort of a nominating convention, but the rules at which who gets to participate in that convention, who gets to stand for election, who's qualified or not qualified to represent that party, those are left to the party. We can set conditions for candidacy. We can create rules for candidate behavior. We can control funding and fundraising. And so let's think about it. What sort of things do we have in common as Americans, right? Take a look at the list of values here. Honesty, transparency, humanity, respect, equality, liberty, justice, excellence. These are non-partisan values, right? Individuals have their own specific biases, and I will not pretend that there are not bigots out there in the world. But these are in many ways the core of what is America. And I know that I can talk to a room full of conservatives, or a room full of liberals, a room full of progressives, or a room full of MAGA folks, and they will find points to agree with on every single one of those lines. Because everybody wants to be not lied to. Everybody wants to have the access they need to see what's going on behind the screens. Everybody wants to be treated like a human being. Everybody wants respect. Everybody wants to be equal. Everybody thinks that their liberty is really important, right? Everybody wants a system that delivers to them some measure of justice. And almost no one is actually opposed to the idea of excellence, right? The idea that we strive for more. We push, right? If it's in scholarship, it's shining the light of knowledge out a little bit further. If it's in industry, it's building something smarter or better or faster. And if it's democracy, maybe it's making things a little more perfect as we go. Imagine a set of core concepts both parties embrace. Servant leadership, right? You don't have to be on the left or the right to have somebody near you look at the people who are involved in your leadership and go, you know what, they're out of touch. They don't get me. They don't get us. They don't come around when I need them. They come around and ask me for a vote, maybe, but I don't hear from them, right? Servant leadership is a well-known concept. And the idea is that you are not there for your own aggrandizement. You are there to serve the people. Inclusive democracy, right? Not only is it vital for your personal inclusion, but it's actually vital to democratic stability. Everybody wants that, as it turns out. Universal prosperity. We want to do well for ourselves, right? I won't quote account to you, but the original position says that, draw rules that it doesn't matter where you show up with, right? And you get what you need. So universal prosperity. Comprehensive education. People are advocates for education. They tend to get a little divided, right, when it's the idea of somebody maybe going off and getting a poetry degree versus somebody doing something that makes a living, or, de-emphasizing trade education, not letting people, go and be plumbers or pipe fitters or drive a semi-truck as we need them. But if you call it comprehensive education, right, and we do accommodate those folks and the pre-K kids, right, and the high schoolers, pretty much everybody gets behind comprehensive education. Even if we quibble about the details, we'll get to that in a minute. Civic citizenship. Even if it wasn't true for you, most of us can imagine a time in which politics was boring, right? When which you could kind of just not every day, right? In which you did not look at the newspaper or the blog system or the evening news as a moment where you I need to gird myself for this, right? Because it's going to hit me, right? Where you could get occasional notices and maybe show up once in a while, where you could actually vote in an election for someone who you maybe went to high school with but was running on the other side because he knew. Because he knew they were a good person. Maybe they disagreed with you on 55% of what was going on, but the parts that fell into the 45 were important enough it was okay. Not a lot of people feel like that anymore. Not a lot of people are comfortable coming to places like this. Not a lot of people are comfortable saying things in the public sphere. civic citizenship is something for all of us, right? As is the rule of law, right? Whether you are someone who at this point in time is outraged at the rule of law, or you're a constitutional conservative, the rule of law is crucial, right? The opposite of the rule of law is either anarchy or tyranny. That's true from both sides of the aisle. Sustainability, right? Now, people have different scopes on sustainability, but no one wants to have polluted water, air, and garbage in their house, or on their block, or on their street. And it does not take a tremendous amount, right, of human kind of recognition to think that no one wants that. Or that even though it's clean here today, you might move tomorrow. You probably want that place to be clean and good too. Or that even if it doesn't get wrecked for you, you want it to be clean for your kids, or for the animals, or because you just care about the planet, or because you do the 2 steps of logical kind of extrapolation to realize that things like, collective action problems will destroy your ability to actually make a living from the planet if it's not managed and sustained. Everybody can get behind sustainability. Right? And then lastly, duty. It's kind of one of those terms that can get thrown around a little bit and people don't think about what it means. It's really easy if there's someone in a sharp uniform, right? Think about what duty is. It's duty to country, it's duty to the Constitution. If you got a teacher, they've got a duty to their students. So much so that we sometimes ask them to lay down their lives if something happens to those students. Right? If you've got a fire person or a police person, right? You've got a duty. Run into the burning building. Stop the criminals. Help people. We also have a duty to each other. Right? Sometimes we use it in weird ways, right? We obey traffic laws, not just because there's a penalty, but because we don't want to hurt anybody. You have a duty to each other. You're probably here tonight because there's some part of you that feels a duty to the system and to the country and to the future. That duty is relevant for those in the far right and those in the far left. We can get behind duty. So I want you to imagine the idea of 2 parties for which this is the core. This is the basis. For which every candidate standing for every office on either side at least agrees on this. We get a tremendous amount of agreement on it. We are closer together than we often think. And then we build a system that keeps it that way. Here are some key features. First, you write the bylaws so that they're mirrored. Neither party can change the bylaws without the other party agreeing to do the same. You anchor them together in the initial draft. Second, you put forward principles of dual candidacy. You don't have one party put forward a candidate if the other one is not putting out the party, and that avoids the third party split problem. You hold your candidates to things like good faith arguments. You require that your internal policy points and your external talking points are data-driven and merit-based. If you have a strong preference one way or the other, you should be able to make that argument to the people, because that is actually the core of democracy. It's not about dissuading participation, it's not about owning a narrative. The core of a properly functioning democracy is that you, as someone who is advocating for policy or change, can go to a community of your neighbors and convince them that's the best way to go. And that needs to be the basis for democratic exchange. Also, good faith opposition. Loyal opposition was a long-held concept in democratic circles, right? Small d democratic circles, parliamentary circles. That, yes, I may disagree with you on this point, and we may kind of, get heated in our conversations. But you are going to be here tomorrow. So am I. And what we really want is a better tomorrow for our country. Right? That's what we really want. Right? And one of the benefits is, if we have loyal opposition and we are doing things that are merit-based and are data-driven, we can actually change our minds. If the idea is we need to find a way to get this community the service it needs, and the first option is a private option, you try it for 5 years. You collect the data, you see if it works. If it did work, you're done. You go on to the next thing. If it didn't work, maybe then you create a governmental program that does the same thing. And if you're all on this same idea of low opposition, you can change your mind. You can let experimentation and the innovation that is supposedly a hallmark of American democracy actually solve problems. We probably also need new leadership. Yeah, I do. I really, really do. And this is not because there are all bad people in politics, right? There are still good human beings with good intentions across the political spectrum, right? However, I had a situation in my grad school where a friend of mine who was studying democracy got to do some survey work in Saudi Arabia and was able to kind of slide under the minders some questionnaires. And the questionnaires asked about things like, do you believe in individual self-determination? Do you believe in rights? Do you believe in the idea of universal suffrage? Do you believe in the idea of all of these different freedoms? And the answers were like 85-15 yes. 85% of the people like, yes, I think that's a good idea. Yes, I think that's a good idea. Yes, I think that's a good idea. But if you appended the term as an American democracy to those exact same questions, the numbers flopped. 15% in favor, 85% against.
That's it looking at us.
Yeah. Right? And because that's a loaded term, I spend some portion of many of my international relations courses or my political theory courses telling people what Marx actually wrote about communism. Right? And then walking through the era of the Cold War and all of the different elements of propaganda and showing them elements, them some of the exact same kind of imagery of us over here being the dirty capitalists, were the exact same kind of things that were distributed about them over there being the dirty communists. We cannot pretend like this history is not here. And many of us have a powerful attraction to the party that we have been associated with our whole lives. And many of us have an inherent revulsion to the party that has been our opposition for many, many years. And if you have that somewhere in your heart, that is exactly the reason we have to move beyond it. Because the best ideas dressed in the clothing of someone who you have seen as an enemy will not be accepted on their merit. Acknowledge the humanity in that. Acknowledge your own biases in that. Right? And more importantly, there are lots and lots and lots of incredibly talented, qualified, capable public servants out there who aren't in the game right now because of everything that's in that system. Or who got shut out of the game when they tried because they weren't willing to do what it took. They weren't willing to compromise. They weren't willing to change. Our talent bench is deep. I'd wager there are folks in this room who, in this kind of a system, would answer the call to public service and probably do incredibly well. Right? We need new leaderships, but we can also do things like a 60-day election cycle. Right? Right? 60-day election cycles. Right? We can't change the general election, but we can certainly change our nomination processes. List of candidates who are interested submit their qualifications to the party, provided they meet all of the rest of the qualifications. They get approved, they get put on the ballot, they get 60 days to make their case in a fair, logical, presented way. And at the end of that process, at a nominating convention, the party chooses who they want to be their champion. We can also restrict fundraising.
Yes.
Right? We can restrict it to individual anonymous contributions, so that no longer is your willingness to cut a check that makes your voice heard. We can also make it so that individual campaigns within the party don't get funded from external sources, right? It's only those individual contributions that go straight to the candidate. You want to give money to the party? Sure, you can give it to the party, right? And they'll use it to support everybody. Or you can give money to the alliance, which we'll get to here in just a minute, which is probably even a better way to do it. We can require candidates to give disclosures, right? You've got to have your finances forward. You've got to have your health forward. People deserve to know who they're hiring. regardless of what you think otherwise. And we can create a code of conduct that says, if you do these things, or if you violate the rest of these rules, you are not eligible for nomination. We can also even influence, should we ever get to a majority with these parties, which is not impossible, the idea that other members of both parties would see to the expulsion of someone who violates that code, right? Send it back to the voters, pick somebody new. Lastly, we live in an era in which my cell phone could have documented every single word spoken in this room. There's really no reason for our public servants doing the job of the people to not have on-the-record meetings with everybody, right? I have no problem with a group that is specifically interested in an issue going forward to a politician and trying to convince them of the merit of that issue. But I also think everybody should be able to know what was said in the room. Want to talk about transparency? Yeah. You want to influence a legislator? You're not just influencing that legislator. You're influencing their constituency. Make your argument to the people. There's no reason for those private conversations to be happening. Not when you can have a microphone in the room and have that transcript published the next day to anybody who wants to read it. Imagine for a moment, this is the way the parties are built and the product that they are trying to create. And imagine for a moment that we have parties that, while departing from our current dispositions, have enough meat left there to attract those people who believe in that. But we're going to reframe it in a way that's inherently positive. The first party is the vigilance. It's those who protect, right? And their role is to maintain the good, right? Their role is to look around at the systems that we have and the things that we do well and make sure that those things remain. And there are lots of things we do well. Elements of our history and tradition that actually create beneficial outcomes for the people. You want to know about maintaining the good? Remember what I said about precedent earlier? Right? Rule of law. There is a role for the vigilance to anchor the things that we do and to maintain the things that we have got right. Likewise, there is a role for the visionaries, right? The visionaries are looking at what's going on and saying, this can be better, that can be better, that doesn't work. And think about that, right? There are always things that can be better. But is it possible to set out trying to make something better and screw it up, make it worse? Of course it is, right? And that's why a visionary needs a vigilant. And is it possible for a vigilant to look at something and go, this is good, but not realize that it's really not good enough? Or that it could be better? Of course they can. And that's why the vigilant needs the visionary. This is not true opposition, right? It's cyclical. I almost brought up yin-yang pictures, right, for this, because it's a little esoteric for some folks. But the idea is that, yes, these are counter forces, right? But they are inherent to each other. They balance each other, and they create real opportunities for each other. The vigilant grounds the visionary, right? And the visionary improves the world around the vigilant and gives them new, better things to protect. It is a whole. And we don't think about our politics this way. But we should. We probably need to. Again, these parties are complementary. They're both necessary. They are both capable of doing good, and they are better with each other than they are apart. And here's the thing that may be speaking directly to you, or sometimes to the uncommitted independents in the world. Right? You might move. You might move over the course of your life, over the course of your career, your perspective, your education, your circumstances. You might move on an individual issue for an individual candidate. You might listen to the argument from a vigilant, and you might listen to the argument from a visionary and say, you know what, I have been a vigilant most of my life. I like what the visionary is saying here. Or the other way around. And it does not and should not matter. We should be able to go, that's the better idea right now. And if you can convince enough of the people to support it, we get more visionaries or we get more vigilance elected, policy moves in that direction. If it doesn't work, it shifts back the other way. That's what representative democratic systems are supposed to be doing. And they're not. So imagine those two parties working. And then ask yourself, what about the rest of us? What are we doing? Right? Obviously, hopefully, we're voting and we're participating, but there's a lot of work to be done here. And we are not going to be consumers of democracy. We're going to be producers. Remember, I said there are three parts to this. The two parties and the alliance. What does the alliance do? The alliance works for the public good. The alliance goes out and educates people in a nonpartisan way, increasing their capacity. The alliance helps fill in the gaps, right? The alliance helps to create things like media literacy for people across the board, right? Create briefs on the issues, sponsor debates, hold lectures, have community roundtables, increase and amplify vital messages, crucial information for the practice of democracy. They also engage in candidate development, nonpartisan candidate development, helping people who have an interest in serving in the public sphere to do so, to make them better once they get there, to anchor them in those shared values. They also can engage in civic improvement. How many people do you know who get involved in this, come to meetings like this, and they're like, I just want to do something? Well, sometimes there's not a campaign to be run, right? There's probably a house that needs built somewhere, right? Or a senior who could use their yard cleaned up. Or a young mother who needs some tips on how to not, leave the baby in the back of the car, right? Or a young tradesperson who's just beginning their craft, right? You could use an opportunity to borrow some tools and sit down with someone who's done it for 50 years, right? There's probably some folks on the other end of it who are finding themselves in their later years just sitting around, watching the paint peel, right? Trying to figure out if this useless feeling is something they have to live with. Now imagine if we had facilitation, right, that brought people together. Listen to that idea. It's bringing people together. Social development. I want to see softball teams, right? Bowling leagues, knitting circles, stitch and bitches, whatever you want to do, right? That bring us back into proximity with each other. We talk about community building, right? Shared frameworks. Not only does this give people a place to go and a place to be around each other, with each other, and for each other, but it also rebuilds the fibrous connections between us. So that when someone decides, hey, you know what, I think I'm vigilant on this one and not so much visionary, there's a conversation. And it doesn't cost you friendships. And it doesn't blow up Thanksgiving. Right? That's what this needs to be. Because there's work to be done every day in every community. Urban communities, rural communities, activities that require money and support, activities that just require person hours, right? And diligent effort. Things that can be done from a keyboard or on the phone, or that can be done with nothing but the sweat of your brow and the strength of your back. There's lots of work here. And if you are a vigilant or you are a visionary and you are out working for the issues that you care about, but you are spending Sunday afternoon watching college football at an event put together with a whole bunch of folks, and they got their little bluebirds or the little redbirds, right? And you get to just scream about the Lions instead of screaming out politics for a few minutes, right? That changes things. And so yes, the vigilants are vital and the visionaries are vital, but this alliance is not just a mid-ground nonprofit organization designed to help American democracy. It's in many ways the point. Because it's one bird. It always has been. If it's ever going to get off the ground, it has to be again. That is my outrageous proposal. Yes, it would require a legion of work. Yes, it would require the kind of endurance that on many days I don't know that I've got. But one of the reasons I'm here talking to you about it is because I couldn't do it alone if I wanted to. This will happen only if there is popular support for it, if people see what it could be. And not just people who are supporting President Trump and are happy to see, MAGA take its next step, or people who are opposed to it and want to see something very, very different than what we've got right now. It does need to be everybody. We're all going to be here tomorrow. So yeah, for liberty, for justice, for us all. I will now be happy to entertain questions, condemnations. Start with Sue. You introduced me. You get the first one.
Oh, wonderful. You have the slide about the key features, and a number of them have to be done by the politicians that are there now. And so I guess, no, there you go.
Yeah.
For example, the limited primary campaigns or restricted fundraising. I don't know how to do that.
Right. This is what I'm telling you. For your own internal party, you don't need the law to do anything else. Again, you can't change the general election. But if you want to say, in order to stand for candidacy within this party, you cannot solicit funds from outside these specific individual donations, you can do that. You can write it into your party bylaws. These new parties can govern that themselves. If we want to say we are going to run our primaries as 60-day elections before our nominating convention, and that you are not allowed to begin campaigning outside that 60-day window, you can do that. We want to say that unless you participate in specific, substantive, fair, moderated debates with your potential other candidates in that 60-day period, you are ineligible for nomination at the party convention, we can do that.
But that the party has to do that.
Correct, right? This would be part of these bylaws. This is where people don't understand the power of parties, because we see the Democrats and the Republicans who have built this functionality in, and the system seems like it's etched in stone. It's actually one of the things that we get into all the time in my civic education classes, because people show up at a primary election and they go to the same place they vote at for the general election, right? And they do the exact same thing on the exact same form, and they presume that that is the way it has to be. But that is just that parties have wound on to the existing election infrastructure because it's convenient and facilitates their operations. You don't have to do it that way. In fact, minor parties in the state of Michigan and many other states can't do it that way. But most people don't see that. Everything on this list can be done without changing a single law, because it's governed internally by the party bylaws and rules. That's why this list is what it is. Okay.
This is very, very interesting. Thank you. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
I think the biggest challenge that I see is that this is not really about most of the people I know fighting as much as it is the people who have billions of dollars setting us against each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the question is, how do you get like the world's richest person out of our politics?
Right. The answer is you build a system in which their influence cannot move more than their own vote. Right?
Do we kick them out first, though, to get started?
We don't have to kick anybody out. They can join the party if they really, really want to, as long as they haven't held other office. Right? But how does that money influence votes? Right? How does money influence votes? We got to think about the causal and connective material there. They don't walk up to somebody, hand them $1 million and say, vote red or vote blue, right? They create issue ads, right? They do things like that, and those would be restricted.
I mean, like big platforms.
Social media platforms, things along those lines,
Yeah,
right?
if they own them, if they own all
sure.
of the press
Right.
and all of the platforms that, you know what I mean?
Right. Anybody in the room started shifting away from traditional media sources in their lifetime? Right? Yeah. No. Non-corporate individual media has become a massive new resource. Anybody with access to a podcast can become a resource, right? And if we have folks who are working in this arena, who are agitating for this kind of a change, they can create new streams of information that are just as powerful and reliable. All you need is internet connection. Right? So yes, there are ways around it. Make no mistake, I don't want to make it seem like I'm guffawing the idea of millions of dollars in the ownership of multinational media platforms, right? But they are not the only way in which we're getting information. Many of us aren't getting information that way anyway. Let's go here and then there. Yeah.
Is there anywhere in the world that is using even close to a system like this?
There are areas in the world in which the construction of parties and party rules are very different than what we have in the United States. Many of the different parliamentary systems or your multi-party systems, including places like India where you can have up to 50 competitive parties and individual districts or riders, will have different kind of constructions. What we have here is a first-past-the-post majoritarian system that's devolved into two parties, and those two parties have been given almost an intractable status. We're not thinking about party dynamics. We're not thinking about party rules here. So is there anything close to this where you have this kind of two-party mirroring system? There are a few where you have party alliances. They're probably not as formal as this. There have been a couple in Eastern Europe, post-Soviet democratization, right, in which parties did come to a certain kind of an agreement on core principles. But this would be more of a novel construction, especially for American politics. But I think that you could find some comparables elsewhere, but they would not match up to this perfectly. No. Okay. Yes, sir.
And for clarity, what you're saying, proposing is that we form on our own as citizens
Yep.
these two new parties and the alliance between them.
That's correct.
And then as more and more people attract them, we would become those parties would displace the current political parties till they're small and ineffective. And then this core becomes the two sides of the aisle, so to speak.
That's right.
With that in mind, it seems to me as I was trying to think of which party would I be in, and I realize I'm in both.
Yep.
I'm in both of those parties. So if you're trying to pick one of those parties, you just have to, am I 55 or 45?
Yeah.
Which side of which one am I on? Which would lead me to think that you could have, then it wouldn't be uncommon for elected members to switch parties when
Very
they
well
felt
said.
that their majority party was missing
Yeah.
a point.
Or you might have individuals who, wear this one instead of either of the two birds, right? They're like, look, I believe in the core principles. I believe in this means of solving problems and arriving at new solutions. But I can go either way on these things, right? I'm not heavily in one camp or the other.
I agree. It seems like a tall order.
Yeah, it does, absolutely, because we don't think of it that way, right? Ask yourself, are you involved in community organizations, volunteer things, right? If you're sitting around trying to figure out how the board of your church is going to work, are you aligning into parties? Or are you listening to arguments, right? You're listening to arguments. Jeannie?
Could this be done, like, let's say you have a local Democratic Party or a local Republican Party, can you make some of those changes within to start the
I think-
change that it would?
Mhm.
Because right now there's
Yeah.
two different Democratic parties, I know for sure right now.
Oh, yeah, there's, the parties aren't naturally big tents, right? Both of them still. And do I think you could make some substantive changes within a local party? Yes, I don't know how effective it would be, because your local parties are generally subservient to county and state parties. Those are getting some element of the marching orders from national parties. And even if one party were to adopt this, it is not the same as both doing it simultaneously and being bound by it, right? That's one of the reasons why I think you would have to create two entirely new parties, having this as a core element of their bylaws from the beginning, and then displace those things. Yes, ma'am?
Where do I go to, I'm not going to remember this. Where
Yes.
do I go to look for it or find out more information?
So this is my first public conversation about this. This is something I've been working on for quite some time. But my plan is to continue speaking about it. There will be a video that's being recorded and a couple of different things that will become available. I highly recommend. Show it to your friends, right? You guys can share the kind of ideas. I also plan on creating smaller, I tend to be long-winded, I'm used to talking for 75 minutes at a time, it's part of the classroom thing. I plan on trying to create a series of smaller videos explaining individual concepts so people can kind of get it bite-sized and not have to sit for an hour and change. Well, we still do have some time left. So I'm looking to build it. However, I'm one guy, right? And need assistance. This kind of thing, and again, even if it isn't exactly what I have laid out here, right? This is my vision as a political scientist and as an individual, right? I'm increasingly and entirely cognizant of the idea that once more people get behind the core concept, it will no longer just be mine and it can't be, right? And so while I am willing to kind of lay out a framework and roll the ball moving, I can't just be the one behind pushing it. So if this is something you think that is desirable and possible and you want to be a part of, we can start having conversations, right? There is no restriction for moving this kind of forward at its core. It's going to take everybody. It's going to take people who are currently liberal, people who are currently conservative, people who have been on the fence the whole time, people who are completely out of the game, right? To make it actually happen. And see any other hands here? Sue again? Sue.
Yeah, so as I listened to you talk, and I did not realize that this was your first public presentation of this, so thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
It makes me wonder if everybody in this room went, yeah, great idea, what would the next step be?
So the next step is actually beginning the process of party creation. Right? You could argue that the first step would be some organizational meetings in order to codify many of the bylaws and things along those lines. That's reasonable to presume at this point, but the creation of a new party, let's say in the state of Michigan, requires filling out some signature forms with the Secretary of State's office and then getting a certain number of signatures in every congressional district before you can be recognized as a state party. That would be one of the first steps, right? So recruitment, obviously.
That's a big step.
Oh, it is, absolutely. Don't remember what I said at the beginning. This is a massive amount of work, right? Don't pretend like it's not. Never pretend like it isn't, right? I would then say, however, consider the consequences of not doing it, right? Yes, sir.
Considering the consequences in your political science history of democracy versus anarchy, has there been any way that could be resolved as far as the anarchy and the democracy? I mean, in history of different countries or...
So revolutions happen. Sometimes they are softer revolutions, sometimes they are harder revolutions. Democracy collapses into anarchy in different places at different times, and it depends on who does the collapsing and what the role of key elements like a military are. Right? We've seen pretty recently in Nepal, actually, a pretty significant state and regime change that was started by students but eventually facilitated by the military. And they've been able to maintain a reasonable amount of stability in that transformation, right? So you can have periods in which you have something that is stable, something that is not stable, and that returns to some kind of stability again. So in the United States, there are a lot of X factors right now, right? If we were to lose democratic stability, if we were to slide into anarchy, it's going to depend on how some of those X factors land. Right? What is the actual popular disposition? To what extent do people get mobilized, either for nonviolent action or violent action? Where does the military and the policing apparatus land up? It's hard to predict.
I think that's pretty scary for a lot of people right now.
It is.
And I just wanted your opinion.
Yeah, no. There are ways in which this gets really, really, really bad. Right? I mean, the track we're on right now. I won't tell you that is the inevitable product of that path. Right? But I will tell you that is certainly one of the outcomes, and potentially even a likely one. Right? I can't sugarcoat that for you.
Right.
Wish I could. Man in the mask.
So there would though be a transitional time where there would be 4 parties in an election?
There would be, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. And there can be as many parties as we put forward. Right? There are already situations. You go in right now, you're not going to see just Democrats, Republicans on your ballot, even at the community level, right? There's a Libertarian Party, there's a Taxpayer Party, there's a Green Party, right? They get generally dismissed as third or minor parties. But we have seen party transformations and transitions in this country before, right? We had a point in time in which the Whig Party was a major party in the United States, right? The original disposition of the American party system was the Democratic Republicans against the Federalists. And so it is not at all impossible for any one party to be subsumed by another party. And it's not impossible for both parties to be subsumed by new ones. Especially if those new ones are giving the people something they are not getting elsewhere. And are bound to things the other parties refuse to acknowledge. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I keep thinking about the numbers of people out there right now who are not at all interested in equality and equity and all that stuff. They just simply want their side to win so that they can dominate the other side. And I think what you're saying is that there's more people in this country who would rather not work that way, would rather work from a position of, look, it's got to work for everybody.
Well, and I'll also say, it'll take a little bit to get some people down off the battlements, right?
Mm-hmm.
It'll take a little while to get some people down off the battlements, right? To essentially de-escalate folks who have been dramatically incensed against other people at this moment. That will take some time. This will not be a painless or a smooth process, no matter how it goes. But if the end result is exactly what you just said, something that works for everybody, right? That is by and large the wild desire for most folks, right? There's a financial company out here that talks about, I remember which one it is, but they talk about, finances should be boring, right? And to some extent, most of governance should also be boring. We should be involved in it. We should have opinions. We should make sure that we are engaged in it, right? But it should be folks coming together and going, hey, we have a problem. This is the problem. We all want the problem to be solved. How do we do that? Right? And if that problem is unfair taxation, or that problem is shortfalls in funding, or that problem is, some kind of a moral or community collapse, or whatever it is, right? The more we have accessible, inclusive, productive systems for engagement, the more that we can deal with ideas and not ideologies, the more that we can communicate with one another, the more likely we are to solve those problems productively. And when those problems are solved productively, that builds legitimacy of the system, builds trust, and it gets us moving forward. Yes, sir.
Well, then I would say that maybe the first step would be then just to build dialogue amongst as many people as possible to recruit them to the idea of these parties becoming a real thing.
I completely agree. Right? That's part of the reason
Rather than running to the Secretary of State for forms, knocking your neighbor's door.
I will agree. There's an all-in kind of a thing, right? I think it's a yes and. We do need to start organizing the formal parties, but we also need people to populate them. You're absolutely right. Right? Yes, sir.
Any thoughts about Representative Jayapov's We the People amendment that she keeps introducing every year?
I am familiar with it in its broad strokes. I'm not familiar with the individual elements and concepts. Most of the broad strokes seem to be well-intentioned, but I would need to do a deeper dive to come out as a personal kind of, I support this or I don't. I've been working on this and a number of other things, so I'm not familiar with enough of the text to be comfortable saying yay or nay. But on its face, it appears to be headed in the right direction. Right? Yes, sir. No, sorry, you.
I'm going to show my bias a little bit here. The media literacy part, I taught journalism, and there's an organization called newsliteracy.org that is free, it's not profit, and it teaches from 7th graders on to 12th. It provides materials to public schools, all schools. And actually, the things that they present would be good even at a college level. And they teach you how to evaluate the news, not what to read or watch, but how to truly evaluate it. Because I truly believe that when people see things and they think it's real, or that it's coming from a certain news source, and it's and with the AI coming up, it's even more important to do that, because I think that's a major shift then for young people coming up if it were taught in the schools.
No, it is educationally, media literacy, civic ability has been neglected. I've talked to folks who at various different levels have seen it removed completely from curriculum because it's generally not part of standardized testing, right? History and some element of social studies are, but civics aren't on the standardized tests for the most part, so they get de-emphasized. I've seen community colleges that have essentially discontinued political science courses, right? I see a couple hands over here. Yes.
I just
Didn't catch the website that she said.
Newsliteracy.org.
Okay.
I would wager that could get bounced out to the Common Cause folks and they could circulate it out if necessary. Yes, ma'am.
Why would you propose a new system of parties over, say, ranked choice voting?
Ranked choice voting is a system that can help people select between parties or between candidates. It advocates for things like, removing elements of lost voting or sometimes strategic voting. But that does not change the parties fundamentally being put on offer. Right? Ranked choice between Republicans and Democrats is still just ranked choice between Republicans and Democrats. And the parties themselves are not then bound to the types of conduct that I think would be necessary to actually restore power to the people, to remove themselves from the influence of moneyed interests, to shift the balance and the disposition of candidates, right? That just changes the mechanism by which they're selected. I'm actually in favor of either ranked or alternative choice voting as a mechanism in democracy, but we can't get ranked choice voting, which is a systemic or policy level change, without changing the political actors, which requires the change amongst the people. And as we've seen, we've made some progress on things like ranked choice voting selectively, but both of the major parties still are in opposition to it, right? So while that will change the mechanism for selection, it does not change the character of what is being selected. And that's the reason why I think that is a systemic change that would be complementary to something like this, but not sufficient to actually get us to where I think we need to be. Does that answer the question? Thank you. Yes, sir.
Would there be a shortcut to calling for a constitutional convention and rewriting these rules into the constitutional convention? Of course, you'd have to front load with all of the work to make everybody so appealing to everybody.
Yeah. A constitutional convention is, especially at the federal level, right, completely unregulated in terms of what its product is.
Yeah.
Right? Which means that if you had a sufficient advocacy for these ideas, you could write them into a constitutional convention. But that's no guarantee.
No.
Right?
No.
You could also eliminate core elements of the Constitution as it is currently constructed that many of us would find very important. Right? The reason we've never had one at the federal level is because it basically takes the existing document and tosses it. And whatever comes out of that constitutional convention is the new constitution.
Yeah. In the last few years, I wouldn't have wanted to say the words out loud in public.
Well, and folks
I think that they're changing.
Folks have discussed it for years, seen it as a possibility. And while I do think that, yes, it would allow for sweeping and dramatic change to happen immediately, right now, I don't know what the country could agree on to go into a new constitution, right? Many of us would agree on this, but this is taking time and work, right? Just kind of clearing the slate and going, all right, what do we want the new thing to be? I think right now would probably be a mistake.
Oh, yeah, I'm saying front-loaded with some time spent building this.
Yes, now, if at some point in time in the future, you were to arrive at a point in time in which these two parties had essentially removed and transcended the existing parties, in which the political temperature had been brought down, in which civic education had brought many of the people up, and we were having much more nuanced conversations, you might then have the grounds to do a constitutional convention. I might also argue you wouldn't need one, because that political environment could produce many of the statutory and even amendment changes needed without a constitutional convention.
Good point.
Right? Yes?
Have you heard of any other states that are looking at this?
No. That's part of the reason I am bringing it up myself. Believe me, there is a tremendous part of me that would love nothing more. My wife and I last year, we bought a house on the Muskegon River. I know many of you probably have a chance to enjoy that particular body of water. If I could go back and teach my classes and sit along that river and pet my cats for the remainder of my career and then retire into someplace happy, that's a much better outcome for my blood pressure than doing what I'm doing right now. I am here and I put the time into this and gotten some of the not so premature grays on this particular front because no one else is doing it. Right? Because people aren't thinking about it this way. And many of you may find it somewhat jarring. Right? This is not the way most people think about this. And that's why I'm bringing it forward. right? Because even if this does not end up being the thing, right? If I can get more people thinking about options and opportunities, and the power of things like parties, the power of organization, and the actual kind of delineated systemic challenges we're facing, then that increases the likelihood that if it's not me, maybe it's somebody else, right? And it's their plan. If they want to tag in and do all of the work, and I just get to sit back under my shady tree and enjoy the product of liberty, I'm willing to sit down. I'm also willing to stand up. All right. Other thoughts or questions?
How can people get a hold of you?
Oh, how can people get a hold of me? So my wife is a wonderful, wonderful advocate for me, and she actually gave me a little barcode thing that I did not successfully integrate into this presentation. I love you, I'm sorry. So the Common Cause folks have my contact information. My first name, last name @ferris.edu is my official email address. That is a way to get a hold of me. I'm happy to give my phone number to anybody who wants it. I'm available on social media. Send me a friend request. Say I saw you at the Common Cause meeting and I'd like to berate you online. It's fine. I'll accept it. I'm perfectly happy to suffer some kind of conversations or even criticisms. Again, if this succeeds, it's not me. It's us, right? And some kind of deliberative dialogue or kind of sincere but hopefully courteous opposition will only make whatever comes of this better. Yes, sir.
You teach 18 to 22-year-olds.
I do as a primary, both at Muskegon Community College and at Ferris. We get a larger than usual disposition of non-traditional students.
Okay.
So I would say most of my classes are like 18 to 28. Right, we get folks who are coming back from the military, folks who are coming back at a second chance at college, but yeah, generally.
So some of them are highly motivated political science folks who are political junkies since they were 14.
A few of them, yeah.
Some of the rest of them are probably cynically burned out on the whole system and are kind of happy that there's people out there who just want to smash mailboxes and kick over the trash cans.
That is correct.
How's this flying?
So I have not brought this to my students because that starts to cross a line I'm very concerned about. Right? This is my opinion. It is my political opinion. This is me advocating for a process. As an educator, I don't think that's my role.
Let me flip the question around.
Okay.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what's the cynical level of the students that you work with on a day-to-day basis?
Actually, it's relatively low. Here's the difference. You have the highly motivated ones from both political persuasions, right? You have a few who are cynical, or who just kind of give you the guffaw, right? Like, it doesn't matter, nothing matters.
Get that Jan ad out of the way.
Yeah, exactly, right? They're just there for the credit. I would say the majority, maybe even the supermajority of folks, are folks for whom their 2 points of exposure to politics are, one, the either half semester or full semester of American government they were forced to sit through in high school, right? If they got it. Not everybody does anymore, right? Or something from their parents, right? If you've motivated parents, if they're involved in one level or another, they're getting it from them. Those are the 2 influences. And neither one of those are particularly well constructed for them to develop their own kind of reasoned opinion or express it. So there's a lot of folks out there, and one of the most common things I get from students is, I think this is important. I don't know anything about it. I don't feel like I can participate. And I don't blame them for that, right? Especially if participation coming out on one side or the other has the potential, as we mentioned earlier, to distance you from many folks, right? It is way easier to just be like, oh, I'm not political. And that's what I see a lot of them doing. Now, maybe they have more specific feelings under the surface, they have inclinations, want to read that, and some of those come out in class, right? We start talking about actual policies, and what do you think? Should we do it this way or that way? You'll notice there'll be a pattern, right? They're consistently kind of falling on one side or the other. But to actually take that next step, right, and really politically activate, many of them, they're hesitant to do so. Mm-hmm. So that is part of the issue there. And it's also part of the issue because, in my personal, putting my own hat on again for a moment, opinion, civic education should be something that is taught all the way back, right? It's reading, it's writing, it's arithmetic, and it's how to conduct yourself in society, how to prepare you for your role as a citizen, how to successfully advocate whatever your interests are, right? This should be stuff that we should and can potentially be embedding in curriculum as soon as they're able to talk, right? And so that by the time they get to me, I can be talking about deep policy nuances, right? I can be helping them understand, some of the fundamental differences in different taxation schemes, or evaluating whether or not alternative vote or ranked choice is a better system. I should be teaching them about things like, droop quotas, right? And getting into that so that they can then go out into the world and make incredibly nuanced, incredibly effective decisions about the way our systems actually work. And as it is, I'm giving them the ABCs of civic ed, right? So that's part of the problem, is that they're woefully unprepared. And I actually, both at Muskegon Community and at Ferris State University, have to approach my instructors. Hopefully they come out more active, more advocating, or more active, better advocates for their own interests and ready to participate. But a lot of them are not there coming in.
And I'm grateful for the ones who can afford to be there where you are at.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, no, I mean, no doubt that it's a position of privilege, right? To be able to be there and do it. Not to mention the privilege of being able to do it well, right? How's your performance in my class going to be if you're holding down 2 jobs and trying to send money back to mom and dad because, they can't pay the bills? Take care of your younger siblings. Worried about health issues. It's a lot harder. Yes, I saw a hand over here.
Well, I know I was just thinking that maybe a good place to start, not with setting up the parties, but with introducing civics to the, to junior high school. That's when I had it. I was as I was getting into my car, I was thinking, aren't these kids, being taught about the fallacies or the characteristics of a dictator or whatever? They need to know that.
We're cutting education.
Yeah, I know. We need to go to the school board.
Yep.
Well, there also needs to be a refresher course, because we find that when we talk to people, and I'm not trying to belittle them, they don't understand the government, how it works. That's adults.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
they
when
have,
I talk to young people.
they yell and say you're a fascist, or the fascist, and it's like, okay, so wait a minute, do you understand what that meant? I mean, they don't understand where we're at.
One hand over here, and then I think Sue has a couple of
Yeah,
things.
the critical thinking and civics as a course of how to behave seems like if you simply teach those things, students are going to come out with the pretty good ideas anyway.
Yeah.
Because if you start working within those parameters, you can't really go too far one way or the other. If you understand that everybody's got to have a piece of the pie.
It's actually the hidden ace in my hand when I'm teaching, right? I don't have to insert my personal political beliefs all that much, because if I just allow them to perceive objective reality and make decisions in the public good, they're within 1 or 2 deviations of where I want to be anyway. Right? I can live with someone who wants to solve this problem in a completely different way, or prioritize it differently from the other problems, right? It's a totally different set of circumstances than we find ourselves facing. Right? Sue, do you have something?
Yeah, I think this kind of goes right into what we've been talking about. Our next forum, we're calling these forums, is Monday, November 3rd, and it's on ranked choice voting. So if you've heard that term a lot and you're wondering what it is, this will be a good opportunity for you to learn about ranked choice voting. And it goes kind of right along with what you're talking about.
Oh, that might be one. Yes, absolutely. Alternate systems of selection, both in terms of party construction, even moving into things like parliamentary systems, are all small d democratic options that are potentially available to us. Nobody knows what they are for the most part, right? Therefore, they're not entertained. And people tend to be very change resistant when it comes to something like our first past the post majoritarian system. But they're all possibles, right? But they're never going to become possibles unless we get people informed about them. So yes, I highly recommend, folks.
So that is on November 3rd, right here, 5 o'clock. Also, if you're interested in the videotape of this, make sure that we have your email address. So just take a few minutes to make sure we have your email address. If you've signed in before, we do. Sue will probably send that out in an email, so if you're interested in getting that. Is there anything else, you guys? We've got tons of cookies.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.